Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. In Pakistan, security forces have killed a TTP terrorist commander in an intelligence-based operation in North Waziristan. In a statement, the military's media wing said the terrorist was involved in the killing of 4 aid workers in the same area on Monday. Prime Minister Imran Khan has invited Sri Lanka to extend its regional and economic connectivity via Pakistan up to Central Asia. Addressing a press conference along with his Sri Lankan counterpart Mahinda Rajapaksa in Colombo, Khan said Pakistan is an important component of the CPAC, which would open new avenues for regional development. Rajapaksa said peace key to achieve economic growth in South Asia. Pakistan has urged the international community to help stop India's systematic violence against women in occupied Kashmir. The Foreign Office said India is using rape of Kashmiri women as an instrument of state terrorism in the occupied valley. This comes as Kashmiris remember the survivors of 1991 mass rape incidents. The United Nations says civilian casualties in Afghanistan have escalated sharply after peace talks began last year. In an annual report, the UN Assistance Mission in Afghanistan said record high casualties were reported in the last 3 months of 2020. Meanwhile, the Taliban have rejected the report that blamed the group for most of the deadly incidents. It comes as negotiators from the Afghan government and the Taliban met in Doha for the first time after weeks of hiatus. The number of COVID-19 deaths in the US has crossed 500,000, while its case load tops 28.1 million. President Joe Biden observed a moment of silence to commemorate the deaths. Meanwhile, Pakistan has registered over 1,000 new cases and 41 deaths overnight as its death toll exceeds 12,600. Globally, the virus has claimed 2.4 million lives and infected over 111 million people so far. And in the Pakistan Super League, Peshawar Zalmi are chasing a target of 194 runs set by Multan Sultans at the National Stadium in Karachi. James Vince scored a blistering knock of 84 runs. Those were the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. In Pakistan, security forces have killed a TTP terrorist commander in an intelligence-based operation in North Waziristan. Beg your pardon. In a statement, the military's media wing said the terrorist was involved in the killing of 4 aid workers in the same area on Monday. He was also responsible for several attacks on security forces and civilians. A large cache of arms was recovered during the operation. Prime Minister Imran Khan has invited Sri Lanka to extend its regional and economic connectivity via Pakistan up to Central Asia. He was addressing a joint press conference after a meeting with his Sri Lankan counterpart Mahinda Rajapaksa in Colombo. Khan said Pakistan is an important component of the CPAC, which will open new avenues for regional development. The Prime Minister said his maiden visit to Sri Lanka is aimed at bolstering bilateral cooperation. In his address, Rajapaksa said economic growth is linked to peace in South Asia. The two also witnessed the signing of 5 agreements in different sectors, including commerce, education and investment. Earlier, upon his arrival in Colombo, Khan was given a gun salute and a guard of honor as well. For more on this, we are joined by former Ambassador Mr. Ghalib Iqbal. Mr. Iqbal, thank you very much for your time at Indus News. How do you see the visit of Prime Minister Imran Khan to Sri Lanka?
I think it's a very welcome opportunity for Pakistan because, especially after COVID, this is Prime Minister's first visit abroad. And going to Sri Lanka, I look at it from 2 points. First is how was the reception according to the Prime Minister? And that was like one of the best you can expect. Second, I think the most important thing which happened was that Pakistan offered Sri Lanka to join CPAC. Joining CPAC by Sri Lanka is going to be beneficial not only to that country but also to Pakistan and the region. And the most important thing which we must keep in mind is that India at the moment has its hegemonic designs which is directly impacting not only Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal, but also partially Pakistan and other regional countries. And it is for this reason that we have been able to go and reconnect with Sri Lanka, with a country with which we have excellent relationship, as both the countries have helped tremendously during their wars, respective wars on terror.
Mr. Iqbal, Imran Khan has also invited Sri Lanka to extend its regional and economic connectivity via Pakistan up to Central Asia. How do you explain this?
This is probably, that's what I said, that this is probably one of the most important things which has come out of the visit. If I have to look at it diplomatically or analyze it, I would say that the main reason of visiting Sri Lanka has already been achieved. When Pakistan offered Sri Lanka to join CPAC, and Sri Lanka has almost agreed to join CPAC. That is the best thing which could happen to this region. For 2 reasons. First is that it is going to generate enormous economic activity in the region, going right up to Central Asia. And secondly, it's going to enhance the political influence of Pakistan and Sri Lanka in the region. And by proxy, that diminishes the influence of India in the region. And that is important at this particular moment because India is at loggerheads with all its neighbors and all the countries in the region. And the smaller countries are trying their best to stand on their feet and face up to India. I think this offer by Pakistan and acceptance by Sri Lanka is going to be a very long-term beneficial relationship between the 2 countries and the region.
Mr. Ghalib Iqbal, former ambassador, thank you very much for your time at Indus News. We really appreciate that. Now moving on, Pakistan has urged the international community help stop India's systematic violence against women in occupied Kashmir. The Foreign Office said India is using a rape of Kashmiri women as an instrument of state terrorism in the occupied valley. The statement comes as Kashmiris remember the survivors of 1991 mass rape incidents.
Kashmiri women have been the worst victims of the harrowing conflict in occupied Kashmir. More than 11,000 women have been gang raped or molested by Indian troops, while nearly 2,300 were killed during the past 3 decades. In 1991, Indian soldiers raped dozens of women in the twin villages of Kunan and Pushpora. Kashmiris on both sides of the line of control observed the 23rd of February as Kashmiri Women's Resistance Day. Pakistan says the day continues to remain a scar on the collective memory of the international community. Pakistan said such heinous crimes have intensified since August 2019, when India illegally revoked Kashmir's special status and imposed a curfew. Meanwhile, an Indian court has framed terror charges against Kashmiri leader Asia Andrabi and her 2 associates. Andrabi has been languishing in jail since April 2018 on fabricated charges.
And now let's talk to Mishal Hussain Malik, a human rights activist. Thank you, Mishal, for your time at Indus News. It's been 3 decades of women who survived a fateful rape incident still fighting for justice. Isn't it a big question mark on the Indian justice system and the so-called democracy over there?
It's been over 30 years, and it was one of the most horrific incidents in the history of mankind, I would say, and for womanhood. How an entire village, the men were taken out and arrested, and the women were raped between the age bracket of 81, and they didn't even spare 3-year-old little girls. And till date, Kashmiri women, Kashmiri families are seeking justice, and nothing has been done to, punish the rapists, the army, because they enjoy immunity over there. Draconian laws give them that complete blank check to do whatever they want, and rape especially is used as a powerful weapon by the Indian forces. And I mean, we've seen in history that incidents of rape and sexual violence and harassments have taken place in war zones and conflict zones, but they've happened on like individual basis, but never have we heard or seen state patronage or state support or state sponsorship towards such horrific incidents, and getting also the clean sheet or the immunity also from the state, and not being persecuted or punished for such heinous crimes.
Mishal, don't you think the world community must act and place sanctions on the Indian army over such heinous crimes against women?
Of course, they need to, especially the UN needs to set up a commission, and also to send a message to the chief prosecutor, forward it to the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court to do legal proceedings against the Indian occupational forces and get them prosecuted for the gross human rights violations, especially that are taking place on women and children in Kashmir. And it is not just the women who are vulnerable, children, young boys in torture cells. They're all are being sexually harassed, tortured, their bodies are being mutilated, and rape victims are not being given any justice. And we have numerous cases of rape incidents if we look at the history of this freedom struggle. And every year this horrific day is remembered on 23rd and 24th night, how women were misused, how they were thrown away, how they were burnt, how all their rights were taken away. And this is not just human rights abuse, it's an abuse of the soul also. The scars of rape and such horrific attacks, they literally, they tear your soul, your mind, your body. And even these punishments, even if we hang these people, they must be hanged. There must be exemplary punishments against these rapists, especially in disputed territories where human beings are already so vulnerable, and they're defenseless. They don't have any legal system to protect them. And now, after 5th of August, before that we had draconian laws. Now we have the Indian public attacking Kashmiris.
Mishal, at a time when Kashmiris are observing Women's Resistance Day, Delhi court has framed fabricated terror charges against Kashmiri leader Asia Andrabi. How do you see this one?
It's expected what's happening with the Kashmiri people, the leadership, and especially Asia Andrabi and Femida Sufi Saiba and a lot of other ladies with them, because they're leading the resistance female movement over there, and they're very active in that. So they're paying a very heavy price. They're locked up in Tihar, and their health is also fragile. She's asthmatic. They're not getting proper legal access, and fabricated cases have been filed against her and her colleagues, and a lot of other female activists. And I really fear for their lives. That is this the way how Kashmiri people who are the most peaceful in their political struggle, fighting for an indigenous recognized right enshrined in the UN, being punished for asking for their right to freedom. So these are definitely acts full of revenge and vendetta against the Kashmiris to eliminate them, and they are not being given. And I would call all the activities, the cases that are being filed against the leadership, especially that's in Tihar, including my husband, I call it judicial terrorism, not just judicial injustice. It's judicial terrorism, which is being imposed by the Indian state authorities. And I condemn it at the highest level, and I've been sending letters to international world bodies, international human rights organizations, especially the UN Human Rights Commission, filing cases over there for the safety of the political prisoners that are Kashmiris.
Mishal Hussain Malik, human rights activist, thank you for talking to Indus News. Moving on, Turkey has called on New Delhi to resolve the Kashmir dispute on the basis of the UN resolutions. Turkey's Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu raised the issue at the United Nations Human Rights Council. The Foreign Minister urged India to ease current restrictions in Jammu and Kashmir. Çavuşoğlu said the issue must be resolved peacefully on the basis of expectations of Kashmiris. He said freedom of speech is key to any democracy.
We reiterate our call to the Indian government to ease the current restrictions in Jammu and Kashmir. We wish for the resolution of the issue through peaceful means on the basis of relevant UN resolutions and the legitimate expectations of the people of Jammu and Kashmir.
A US-based NGO committee to protect journalists have asked New Delhi to drop investigations into work of 3 Kashmiri journalists. This comes after the Indian administration in occupied Kashmir opened criminal investigations into journalists for alleged incitement. In a statement, it said journalists Yashraj Sharma, Mir Junaid and Sajjad Gul should be allowed to do their jobs without harassment. It said Indian authorities must stop targeting journalists because of their reporting. A police case has been registered against Sajjad Gul for reporting the demolition drive in Bandipora district. Earlier, a court rejected Shah and Sharma's petition for the preemptive bail. Now Sajjad Gul has joined us. Let's ask him about the illegal demolition of houses in occupied Kashmir. Sajjad, thank you for your time at Indus News. Is the demolition drive part of Indian attempts to change the demography of the region?
I have talked with these revenue officers, particularly with the Tahsildar. He said me that I have orders from head authorities and I have to vacate their lands. And when I asked him a question about why the people go, you are making them homeless because they don't have any other alternative land. He's saying me that I don't care about their rehabilitation.
Sajjad, what sort of intimidation are you facing for covering this story?
Simply, I filed a very small story which angered the Tahsildar. The story was actually about a demolition drive he was carrying here in our in North Kashmir's Hajan Sonavari belt. The story was on his demolition drive. Actually, the angle of my story was that he was threatened. According to the local, they were alleging that he's threatening, abusing, and asking us to vacate the land. We don't have any other land where we can reside. But that's the way. That's why people called me. As I'm a lone reporter here home, they called and said that please get it reported. When I filed a story, he started harassing me. He called me. He even called me through a local DSP here. He was asking me to come at the police station, but I told them that I can't come there because I was busy on that day somewhere on another story. It happened on the 9th of February.
Sajjad, last year saw a surge in harassment of journalists and sedition cases were filed against many of them. What do you say on this?
It's a growing concern in Kashmir. all over in India, particularly in Kashmir, voices are being muzzled. There is freedom of expression, but not freedom of expression. That's what happened with me. Even I have told the police after I was filed an FIR. I was some 60 kilometers away from my home, but I have told the police to because I was involved in a spoon padding case by the police. On that day, I was at Rajbagh in Srinagar, and I told them to the police situation concerned. I have even requested them to trace my cell phone on that day, but to my utter dismay, they are not resolving the matter. FIR is still registered against me, although I repeatedly asked them to remove it.
Siddharth Gul, a Srinagar-based journalist, thank you for being at Indus News. We really appreciate that. And now moving on, in India, the protesting farmers have announced to intensify their agitation against the government's contentious farm laws. The growers have also begun a series of events to mark similar protests against the anti-farmer laws by the British government in 1907. Congress leader Priyanka Gandhi will also be attending a farmers' meeting in Uttar Pradesh today. The unions say they will make their future line of action public on February the 28th. The United Nations says civilian casualties in Afghanistan have risen sharply after peace talks began last year. In an annual report, the UN assistance mission in Afghanistan said record high casualties were reported in the last 3 months of 2020. It said for a 7th consecutive year, UNAMA documented more than 3,000 civilians killed in a single year in Afghanistan. The mission reported 30% of casualties were children, while 13% were women. The Taliban have rejected the report that blamed the group for most of the deadly incidents. In a statement, the group said its concerns, information and details have not been taken up in the report. It comes as the negotiators from the Afghan government and the Taliban met in Doha for the first time after weeks of hiatus. The group of 7 rich countries says the use of violence against the people protesting against a coup in Myanmar is unacceptable. In a joint statement, the G7 foreign ministers said the perpetrators must be held accountable. The United States has also imposed sanctions on the Myanmar military's 2 generals for their role in the coup. In a statement, U.S. Treasury Department warned of further action if the military does not urgently restore democracy in Myanmar. Earlier, the European Union also approved sanctions on Myanmar's military. Meanwhile, Myanmar's army has threatened to withdraw licenses of the media outlets for using the word coup. Pro-democracy protests continue in Myanmar to seek reversal of the coup and the release of Aung San Suu Kyi. The U.S. says Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's comment on uranium enrichment sounds like a threat. In a statement, the State Department spokesperson reiterated U.S. willingness to engage in talks with Iran about returning to the 2015 nuclear deal. However, spokesman Ned Price said Tehran has not responded formally to the earlier talks offer. Earlier, Khamenei said Iran must enrich uranium up to 60% purity if needed. Speaking to the Assembly of Experts, Khamenei said Iran will never yield to the U.S. pressure over its nuclear program. This came as Iran ended the implementation of additional protocols to carry out snap inspections at nuclear sites not declared to the IAEA. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has stressed the importance of a 2-state solution for Israeli-Palestinian peace. The State Department said Blinken held a telephonic conversation with his Israeli counterpart. In a statement, the department said Blinken said the 2-state solution is best for Israel's future as a Jewish and democratic state. It said Blinken stressed the importance of Israel's peaceful coexistence alongside a viable and the democratic Palestinian state. It added the secretary addressed the U.S. approach towards a more peaceful future for Israelis, Palestinians, and the greater Middle East. Moscow says the European Union's planned sanctions against Russia are unlawful and are cause for disappointment. Earlier, EU foreign ministers agreed to impose sanctions on 4 Russian officials involved in jailing Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny. In a statement, the Russian Foreign Ministry said Brussels has missed an opportunity to change its course with regards to Moscow. It added the EU again instinctively has pushed the inoperative sanctions button. The ministry said, defying logic, first a political decision is made and then it is planned to arbitrarily find candidates for it. The ministry said it is typical that the EU global human rights sanctions regime will be used against Russians. In Georgia, police have detained the top opposition leader, Nika Melia, and used tear gas in a violent raid on his party headquarters. Opposition activists clashed with police on the street, while scores of them were arrested. Melia had been accused of inciting violence at street protests in June 2019, a charge he has dismissed as politically motivated. A court in the capital, Tbilisi, ordered last week that Melia be taken into custody for already failing to post bail. But the Interior Ministry postponed the decision following the resignation of Prime Minister Georgi Gakharia on the matter. Meanwhile, Georgia's parliament has elected a new Prime Minister, Irakli Garibashvili, and the cabinet he put forward. More stories to follow, but right after a short break, stay tuned. Welcome back. The number of COVID-19 deaths in the US has crossed 500,000, while the caseload tops 28 million. Globally, the virus has claimed 2.4 million lives and infected over 111 million people so far. More in this report.
Bells tolled at the National Cathedral in Washington to honor the 500,000 lives lost to COVID-19. President Joe Biden observed a moment of silence to commemorate the deaths. Biden ordered the U.S. flag to be flown at half-mast on public buildings and grounds until sunset on Friday. The president also urged Americans to set aside partisan differences and fight the pandemic together.
I also ask us to act, to remain vigilant, to stay socially distanced, to mask up, get vaccinated when it's your turn. We must end the politics and misinformation that's divided families, communities in the country. And has cost too many lives already.
The situation in Europe is not much different as COVID-19 hospitalizations in France continue to surge. However, the British government data has shown a 70% decline in infections after the first Pfizer vaccine shot. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has unveiled a plan to gradually ease curbs. He warned that it can be sustainable only if the UK's vaccine rollout continues seamlessly. But Johnson's chief scientific advisor believes it is too early to be talking about absolute normalcy.
It's possible that coming into next winter, in particular, certain things may be necessary. And Tony Fauci yesterday said in the US that he thought that things like masks may be needed next winter. And I think we're in the same position, that it may be necessary next winter to have things like mask wearing in certain situations.
Australia is set to ramp up its immunization drive with more shots rolled out from next week. Meanwhile, a study has found that people's sense of smell and taste may not return for up to 5 months after contracting coronavirus.
Pakistan has reported 41 deaths and 1,050 coronavirus infections over the past 24 hours. This has pushed the country's death toll to 12,658. The Health Ministry said so far over 573,000 people across the country contracted the virus, out of which more than 536,000 have recovered. The ministry said there are more than 24,000 active cases in the country. It said out of over 2,000 patients admitted in hospitals, 1,616 are in critical condition. In Pakistan, Chief of the Naval Staff, Admiral Mohammad Amjad Khan Niazi, has stressed the need to maintain a high level of combat readiness. He was speaking at the Pakistan Navy Operational Command seminar held at Bahria Auditorium in Karachi. Admiral Niazi called on naval forces to develop strategies to cope with evolving threats in the maritime domain. He also highlighted various initiatives undertaken by the Pakistan Navy to maintain a potent force. The naval chief commended panel members for presenting well-researched papers. and the organizers for professionally conducting the seminar. Over 11,000 Ebola vaccines supplied by the World Health Organization have arrived in Conakry, the capital of Guinea. A new outbreak was declared in the West African country on the 14th of February. In a tweet, the WHO said timely vaccination will be crucial in curbing the Ebola outbreak. WHO's Africa Director, Matshidiso Moiti, said a vaccination team has also been deployed to Nazaré. The country has recorded 8 cases, 5 deaths and 380 contacts, of which 98% are being monitored. The U.S. Supreme Court has ordered former President Donald Trump to hand over his tax returns to New York City prosecutors. This ends Trump's 18-month quest to conceal the details of his finances. The judges rejected Trump's request to block an earlier ruling by a lower court that said the records were pertinent to a criminal probe. Responding to the decision in a statement, Trump called the inquiry a politically motivated attack by New York Democrats and a continuation of the greatest political witch hunt in the U.S. history. He said the Supreme Court should never let this fishing expedition happen. U.S. authorities have arrested the wife of the Mexican drug cartel's former chief, Joaquim El Chapo Guzman. The Justice Department says Emma Coronel Aispuro was held over her alleged involvement in international drug trafficking. In a statement, the department said Coronel was arrested at the Dulles International Airport in Northern Virginia. The statement read she's scheduled to virtually appear in the federal court later today. Authorities say the 31-year-old was charged with conspiring to distribute drugs for unlawful importation into the U.S. Additionally, she is alleged to have conspired with others to assist Guzman in his July 11, 2015 escape from a prison in Mexico. Guzman was convicted in February 2019 of trafficking tons of drugs and engaging in multiple murder conspiracies. In Texas, nearly 8 million people are still facing water shortage after the record-breaking freeze knocked out power stations last week. Officials say more than 1,200 public water systems reported service disruptions. They say 147 water systems and 4 wastewater treatment facilities are still non-operational. Authorities have advised people to boil water before drinking. Earlier, Texas Governor Greg Abbott joined state and federal authorities in distributing 3.5 million bottles of water. Extreme cold weather has claimed dozens of lives and prompted a major disaster declaration for Texas. Brazil's northwestern state of Acre has declared a state of emergency as torrential rains lashed the region. The rains have brought intense flooding and affected more than 120,000 people. TV footage from Acre showed rain-swollen rivers, flooded streets, and residents going around in boats in the floodwaters. Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro has also visited the region on the border with Peru. More than 6,000 residents have been displaced by the flooding in Acre, which is home to about 895,000 people. The state is also grappling with outbreaks of dengue and COVID-19. Facebook says it will restore Australian news pages after negotiating changes to a proposed law that will force the tech giant to pay for media content. Canberra has agreed to amend the mechanism for final after arbitration, among 3 others. Talking to reporters in Canberra, Treasurer Josh Frydenberg said Facebook has refriended Australia. He added Facebook will enter into negotiations with news outlets to strike agreements.
Well, Facebook has refriended Australia, and Australian news will be restored to the Facebook platform. And Facebook has committed to entering into good faith negotiations with Australian news media businesses in seeking to reach agreements to pay for content.
Meanwhile, Facebook says it will retain the ability to decide if news appears on its platform. Now moving on, NASA has released a video captured by Mars rover Perseverance during its landing on the surface of the Red Planet. Scientists have isolated and slowed down parts of the video and audio to explain the first sights and sounds captured by the spacecraft. More about the Red Planet in this report.
Thanks to NASA, we now have the first ever video of landing on Mars' surface. The self-guided descent and landing stand as the most elaborate and challenging feat in the annals of robotic spaceflight. The 3-minute video shows Perseverance landing in a swirl of sand as rocks are kicked up from the surface by the rover's rocket engines. 5 cameras located on 3 different components of the spacecraft collected the footage.
It gives me goosebumps every time I see it. Just amazing. I hope everybody kept their hands and arms inside the vehicle at all times while it was in motion.
The 6-wheeled vehicle came to rest about 2 kilometers from towering cliffs at the foot of a remnant of a fan-shaped river delta. The delta is at the corner of a crater that is considered a prime spot for geobiological study on Mars. Scientists hope to find biosignatures in sediments that Perseverance is designed to extract from Mars for future analysis back on Earth.
We have our coring drill in the center, our Pixel and Sherlock instruments mounted to the side, and that black tank is to support the gas dust removal tool, which will remove dust from the surfaces that we will be inspecting later.
Perseverance sailed through space for nearly 7 months, covering 293 million miles before reaching Mars. It entered the atmosphere of the red planet at 12,000 miles per hour to begin its descent to the planet's surface.
Rollerblades are not just for recreation now, as Pakistan's police force will be hopping on them to catch the criminals. More on this report.
Skating in a circle with their weapons pointed inwards, these members of the Karachi police are not having fun, but they're getting ready to patrol the narrow streets and alleys of Pakistan's port city. A special rollerblade squad of 20 weapon-wielding men and women has been formed by the Karachi police. The idea is to increase the mobility and accessibility of police in places where vehicles are difficult to operate.
We felt we needed to come up with some innovative approach to control street crime in Karachi. We analyzed and saw there are certain spots where crime incidents, say for example mobile snatching, are more frequent. We also saw that criminals use motorcycles that help them run away easily. At times, it is difficult for police teams to chase them from our vehicles.
Police officials say the skating force will be sent to public places with a higher incidence of theft and harassment. The rigorous training for the newly armed rollerblading unit has been taking place for over a month.
At the moment, this is a beginning, but I feel through proper training, we will be able to curb crime in the future. This will benefit us as we can reach narrow alleys very quickly where it was usually difficult to reach before.
Amid safety concerns, the squad would only be carrying handguns to reduce the risk of bullets recoiling.
A clip of a tractor shaking orange trees in Spain has gained thousands of retweets and likes on social media. But on the streets of orange-producing Valencia, it seems less out of the ordinary. This report has more. What's amusing for others is a common occurrence in Valencia, where tractors intensively shake trees and catch the bitter oranges in giant plastic nets. There are 12,000 such trees across the city, and between 350 and 400 tons of oranges are taken each year.
People often ask us, what are you going to do with the oranges? If they were good, they would not be on the tree. Or they ask, can we take them? Are they fit for consumption? So there are many very different situations in the day-to-day of what is happening to us.
Bitter oranges hanging from the trees are not fit for human consumption, and the picked up fruits are destined to make compost. While the annual orange picking campaign takes place, some residents continue to be amused.
People go with their mobile phone and we are working on the street. People are talking on WhatsApp and suddenly they bump into the tractor and you have to be stopping people, telling them to be careful with the tractor.
One member of the pickup brigade, Vicente Jimenez, is not surprised by people's confusion, but says they need to look where they are going and avoid bumping into the tractors. British luxury label Burberry has released its Autumn-Winter 2021 collection focused on menswear. Burberry's Riccardo Tisci says the dream of exploration of freedom denied during COVID-19 lockdowns inspired the collection.
British luxury label Burberry has released its Autumn-Winter 2021 collection focused on menswear. Burberry's Riccardo Tisci says that the dream of exploration, of freedom denied during COVID-19 lockdowns, inspired the collection. Outerwear was a focus of the new designs showcased at Burberry's flagship Regent Street store in central London. In a press release, Tisci said that the collection was inspired by the British craft and outdoor movements of the early 20th century. Burberry's traditional trenches were reimagined with pleats, panels, and fringes in the new collection. The color palette centered on tonal shades of beige, dark brown, oxblood burgundy, and city grays. Tisci's designs have attracted new, younger customers, particularly in the Chinese market. Like other labels, Burberry has been hit hard by global restrictions on shop opening and travel and tourism. The company has said it is confident of rebounding as the pandemic eases.
It's time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. Another weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. With the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.